Welcome to the Super Fantasy Bros podcast, which is part of the Triple Play Fantasy Network. I am one half of the team, Kevin Coleman, and I am joined on the podcast by my smarter co-host here, Jacob Dunne. Jacob, how we doing?
Doing well, man. I got to see my baby boy today via ultrasound, and the doctor assured us he's healthy, so I'm riding on cloud 9 right now.
Hey, it's getting real now, huh? Getting that second kid, it's a whole game changer.
Too real, man. He's due in like a couple weeks, so let's go.
I mean, I'm excited. Another fantasy football mind out here to get him trained and get him ready to go.
But yeah, exactly.
Your wife's going to love that. Well, on today's show, we are covering second-year players who have the best chance to break out this season and our favorite sleepers in redraft and dynasty. So let's go talk about it. Here we go! Now, before we get to those, before we start talking about breakouts and sleepers and all that, Jacob, do you have any news that we want to cover real off the top? Any NFL guys?
Yeah, so reports from New England Patriots training camp is that Mac Jones has a legit shot at starting. So keep that in mind as we go throughout the offseason. Like there is no reason to adjust your rankings yet, but just keep that in mind because that could change the whole landscape of how we draft all these Patriots players.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting what we do with Cam, redraft-wise too, especially. I think that has a lot of significance redraft-wise because that's going to be a hell of a situation to try to figure out there. And do you trust Belichick and his coach speak, right? I hate coach talk. I don't trust Belichick more than anybody else out there. Is there I love segues. Let's do a segue. Is there any other coach out there that you trust less than Belichick? Because I saw this on Twitter and I thought it was pretty funny.
Trust less than Belichick. I mean, yeah. I don't trust Pete Carroll when it comes to passing the ball. But as far as overall, no, there is no one worse than Bill Belichick when it comes to fantasy.
Belichick, you burned me too many times, my friend. Too many times.
Don McVay came super close when he was like a three-man Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Malcolm Brown last year, which we'll get into later, but it's still Bill by a mile.
Oh, God, yeah, the Malcolm Brown show. Damn it, McVay. Like, you drove me nuts last year as an Akers owner with Malcolm Brown out there just getting all the touches, even over Darrell Henderson, even in those games against the Dolphins in those games. All right, well, hey, before we talk about breakout players, because I always see that and it frustrates me to no end. Like, oh, he's my breakout. Well, he's my breakout. But before we talk about what that is, we got to define it first. Mm-hmm. So, like, I really want to know, what does it mean to you? Because it means everything differently to different managers, like in different analysts. Like, well, breakout means this. Because it could mean like a tight end 6 going to a tight end 3. It means they're elite. To you, what does breakout mean?
Breakout really means like where did they finish? Where did they finish last year? And are they going to jump like 10 to 15 spots this season? Like, do you think they're going to break out? Like, break the ceiling of what they showed us last season. Let's just say that Robbie Anderson finished as a wide receiver 3. Is he going to break out and be a wide receiver 2 or 1? That's just a random example. But like a mediocre player last season, is he going to be good? A good player last season, is he going to be great? And then a great player last year, is he going to be otherworldly? Like, we want to know who's going to break into that next tier.
Okay, no, that's fair. I think the tier is important, right? Like, who is going to be that next guy? How do they step up? Where those tiers go? I put some down, but like, I think it's 2. I always break it into 2. Like, can a player become relevant and can a player become elite? So when I'm looking at breakouts, like, okay, like quarterback, a player outside the top 12 finishes in the top 12. Well, then that's a breakout season. Like, okay, well, he became more relevant in terms of especially redraft. And then you look at it like, hey, can someone finish that's outside the top 6 finish inside the top 6? So I like Tannehill was a guy that went from 21 to 7 last year. That's a breakout, right? Like, that's pretty legit. And then Kyler Murray went from 7 to 1. Depending on where you looked at him and Allen. Those are 2 separate breakouts to me. Like, elite, like Kyler Murray's elite. Like, I drafted Kyler Murray last year as my the QB2 in Dynasty in a startup. And I got kind of crapped on. And now it looks like, oh, that's actually kind of the right move.
Oh, actually, Kevin's a genius. Huh.
Well, I also said Darius Guys was going to break out, and he decided to, get in trouble with the law. So
that's not your fault, though. He could have.
Yeah, there was a lot of red flags there, Jacob. There was a lot of red flags that I decided that didn't matter. But anyway, let's move on from guys. And then, same thing with running backs, right? Like, I look at running backs like top 24. Like, hey, do they break that top 24 barrier? Did they get in there?
Yeah.
And then wide receivers, same thing. Tight ends, it's really top 3 for me. Can they get in that elite and in top 6? But the after 3, tight ends are just – it's hard to represent breakouts there. But like a guy like – it was interesting to see. So when I was doing my research, David Montgomery actually went from 25 to 6. But I don't see anybody calling David Montgomery a elite breakout type guy, right? Everybody says it's schedule dependent, all these different things. Are you on? What is your opinion of Montgomery? Because he is technically finished as 6th, running back 6 last year. Did he have a breakout, or was he lucky? Do we call luck? What is luck? What is luck to you, Jacob?
So I don't exactly call it luck, but I do think that he was gifted this perfect schedule, and the fact that Tariq Cohen was also hurt, so there was nobody there in Chicago to challenge him for any touches. So it was the David Montgomery show, but this season, Tariq
Cohen
is back, and so is Damian Williams, who could also steal some touches. Now, there is a coach speak report that Montgomery is going to have an even bigger season with more touches. And to that, I say I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not going to adjust my rankings one bit because there are running backs back there chomping at the bit, and there's also an Andy Dalton. He's starting, and even if Justin Fields starts quickly, it could help a David Montgomery, but Justin Fields could also face those rookie lows. So Montgomery is just a middling RB2, like RB 12 to 16, probably more towards like that 16 range right now.
Okay, so you want to look at, especially like he had so would you call his last season a breakout then, or would you just say it was a perfect storm of everything that went right?
I think it was a perfect storm.
Fair.
He was like RB 20 something before that crazy schedule came, and then he killed it for those weeks, which he should have, and he did. I'm not taking anything against him. He performed like he should have in the games against the lower bottom rushing defense teams. He did his job. It's just I would not call that a breakout.
Okay. I think it's hard to define sometimes, right? Like, okay, right. Can they get in those next tiers? He did get in those tiers, but was it more about his surrounding cast? But should we incorporate that into our breakout, like kind of our barometer, right? Like, okay, look at this guy. He has a legit shot. Like, I think one guy is Hawkinson. Like, everybody's talking about Hawkinson all over the place. We're not even talking about him, but we know this show. It goes on tangents. Like, so Hawkinson, people are talking about him being a top 3 tight end. That would be, if he did finish in the top 3, if everybody stayed healthy, that to me is an elite breakout. I don't think that's going to happen, but he does have a pretty good scenario around him where he's at, situation, target, volume, everything, where he could accompany that. But if he was able to get in the top 3 based on the talent at that tight end position in the top 3, I might still consider that a breakout, right? So there's kind of a nuance to it. Right.
And Hawkinson has the advantage of pure volume, just because who are the targets going to? A Rashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams. I mean, it is going to be the Hawkinson show. How many yards he'll get is to be determined, but he will get those targets for sure. So he has that ceiling, but I'm not trusting him as a tight end 3, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Hey, no Tyrell Williams slander on this show. Look at this, Jacob just throwing him under the bus there. All right, let's get to what we're here for. We're gonna shift gears a little bit, and we are gonna talk about Cam Akers as one of our breakout second-year guys. And he's been in the news a little bit. Darrell Henderson being there and all these different things. So, what is your take on Cam?
All right. So Cam Akers. Let's reflect back on the 2020 season. Kevin, did you know, or do you remember that he actually started the first 2 games?
I did know that, but he didn't perform the way I would like.
Right. So, I mean, like, the hype train was there, even though, like, Sean McVay said that it was going to be a committee to start. the Rams wanted him to start and to take over. But, like you said, he underperformed. 14 carries for 39 yards, and then the second game, 3 carries, and then he got hurt with a rib injury. So, yes, McVay wanted that backfield to start with a committee of Brown, Akers, and Henderson, but, injuries led way to Darrell Henderson starting for most of the season until Cam Akers came back 100% healthy and was pretty much a healthy scratch. For 2 weeks there, he played on 2% of snaps and 4% of snaps. But then, weeks 8 through 11, he started to average more carries. He averaged about 8.3 attempts per game. And then he went on to dominate the Rams backfield from weeks 12 on, averaging 21.5 carries for 85 yards. He also grabbed 2 catches for 24 yards, averaged that in that span. So, not to mention Akers was a beast in the actual NFL playoffs as well. I know that fantasy was over, but the Rams trusted him even when Darrell Henderson was 100% healthy. He was just sitting there on the sidelines as Akers totaled 46 carries in those 2 playoff games for a total of 221 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think that the Rams want to give Akers the ball 100%, a la like they did Todd Gurley a few years back.
I think that's fair. To me, it just depends. So right now in redraft, he's going to ADP 15. So around 203, 202, 203, 204 right. In that category. Running back 11. I'm okay with drafting Akers as my running back too. I think that's a very safe floor, right? And look at me talking about floors, even though I don't like floors. But I think he's a very safe running back floor. I like Henderson, so don't get me wrong. I think that Henderson is a very serviceable back. I think there's probably going to be some games where he vultures touchdowns from Cam. That's a legitimate thing that's just going to have to happen. I think in PPR, I really like Cam Akers because I think he can get targets in the game. He didn't see a ton of targets last year, but those last couple of games, he saw 3 each, and he had 4 the last year or the last game of the year against Arizona. So I do think they're going to get him more involved in the offense there. I like Cam. I don't understand why people are so down on him. I've been seeing him really fall down a little bit. I still think they're going to rely on him in that 3 wide receiver set. They'd use the play action there in Los Angeles. McVay still is one of the best offensive coordinators in there. I don't think people keep saying that, he got 29 carries, so that's a good thing. He's not going to get 29 carries in the regular season. I would honestly say 21 carries is a good barometer. That's a good base for him. 21 carries, 4 or 5 targets, he scores a touchdown, a very safe floor. I think he could average around 15 to 16 fantasy points per game. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, and as you said, Darrell Henderson is being hyped up right now thanks to his low to ADP. He is being drafted as the RB 48 in the 12th round. I understand taking him late in a best ball situation just in case Cam Akers gets hurt, but unless you have the intention of handcuffing Akers in redraft leagues, I wouldn't draft Henderson there. Henderson good, he could get 5 carries a game to give Akers a breather, but this is Cam Akers' backfield, and the Rams drafted Cam to be their bell cow guy. I think that Akers is easily the top of my tier 3 running backs, along with Antonio Gibson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and DeAndre Swift. And to be honest, Akers is actually creeping his way into the bottom tier of my tier 2, which would be Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, and Aaron Jones. Akers is almost in a tier of his own, where I would like to get Akers, like you said, as my RB2, in the beginning of the second round, to couple him with a Chubb or with an Aaron Jones.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's totally fair there. You're going to be getting him in that beginning of the second. So roster building wise, redraft wise, I think like you had talked about, you could actually pair Chubb and Akers together if you wanted to. And I think that's a great duo, right? Because you have top 5 potential with Chubb, and then you have Akers with high potential there with a safe floor. I like that. I do like that. Dynasty wise, I love Akers. I mean, he's going as running back 8 in Dynasty. And I think that's fair in Dynasty because like what we just talked about, I think he has a 2-year, I always do 2 to 3 years, but 2-year window here where he's going to perform very well in a high-powered offense with Stafford being there. He's not going to have to really fight for those. I think that's a better than Goff was. I think he's going to get the targets. I do. I like Akers in Dynasty. I actually think, like you said, I basically out of the class last year, I would still take Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, but it's close. I'm a Swift truther, though. So in Dynasty, I think he's a little bit more talented. But in Akers is, for me, the third guy. Like, that's the guy in there that you want to grab in Dynasty.
That's fair.
So that's the guys there. So I would say draft Cam. I mean, Cam is legitimately in one of the best offenses in the country in NFL. He has the ability. He's going to get the volume. He's going to get the targets. I don't worry about Henderson as much as some guys do. I think Henderson's touchdown dependent, injury dependent.
Yes. And on top of that, Akers has a huge upgrade at QB. Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, everything is going Cam Akers' way for a true breakout this season.
Yeah, no, I agree. So first guy was Cam Akers. We're going to talk about the second guy because I absolutely love this second guy. So Jacob, why don't you tell us who the second guy is?
The second guy is CeeDee Lamb. I know this is Kevin's boy. He's on the boys. I mean, he is an absolute beast. And even though he had a somewhat of like an inconsistent rookie season, he still finished as wide receiver 20. Despite losing Dak Prescott, and dealing with the Andy Dalton of it all. On the season, he averaged 6.9 targets, and on those 6.9 targets, he averaged 4.6 catches for 58.4 yards and totaled 5 touchdowns. Now with Dak back, I fully expect his targets to go upwards to what he was averaging when Dak was healthy, and that was around 7.3 targets through the first 4 weeks. And Lamb could even garner more targets, now that it's his sophomore season. He's more comfortable with the offense. So to me, Lamb is a no-brainer pick in the 4th to 5th round of your drafts. And if I can get him as my wide receiver 2, I would be doing backflips. I would be jumping for joy. So now I'm going to give the mic to you, Kevin, and just go off on your boy CeeDee.
Yeah, CeeDee is a smash, guys. Like in this offense, with how bad our defense is, with Dak being back, everybody has seen the splits between Dak being there and not being there on the field. And even in half PPR formats, he was wide receiver 12 with Dak. In PPR formats, he's going to be in that wide receiver 8 category already if Dak was to stay healthy. I think CeeDee is going to lead the team in targets. He's going to lead the team in yards and touchdowns. And again, granted, I am not an Amari Cooper guy at all. So those Amari Cooper stands out there, I know you're out there. I do think Amari is going to be fine. I just think that CeeDee is going to lead the team in all 3 categories. But I also think the Cowboys are going to basically lead the team. All 3 wide receivers are going to have 1,000 yards receiving. So I think that Dak's going to have a huge year, QB1 number year. So that's why I'm gonna fall on the CeeDee Lamb train. And if I had Justin Jefferson right now, I would trade Justin Jefferson for CeeDee Lamb. That's how much I believe in CeeDee Lamb.
That's a hot take, Kevin.
I would do it.
I love it just because, like I said, like Justin Jefferson, his defense is going to get better. Like on the Vikings, they're getting back key defensive players. He might not be needed as much, whereas Lamb is going to be needed a ton this year with that Cowboys defense ranking bottom of the league. So, I mean, I think that's a hot take, Kevin, to trade Jefferson for Lamb, but perhaps you can take advantage and do Jefferson for Lamb plus a future first or like something else that you need help with, and they would probably easily take that deal, right?
Yeah, so I've seen him go straight up in a league. They just swapped, which is weird to me.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to do that if I have Jefferson. Like, I'm going to get something else back.
Right.
Like, especially because I think Justin Jefferson's perceived value is the highest it's going to be. We talked about that last week, and I just wrote a column for Dynasty Rewind and their patrons, and I talked about that. Justin Jefferson's going for CMC. That is Justin Jefferson's value right now. Like,
wow.
They basically in a package for CMC. So if you can take Justin Jefferson and get CeeDee, who I think will finish ahead of him in a high-powered offense, and for dynasty-wise, the reason why I want CeeDee Lamb is because of Dak Prescott. I know that I have CeeDee Lamb with Dak. who is Justin Jefferson going to be with for the next couple of years? Kirk Cousins, fine, that's okay,
Right.
but Kirk's going to go away. It can't be Kellen Mond. Trust me, it cannot be Kellen Mond. Stop wasting draft picks on Kellen Mond in the third round. It's just not going to be there. So that's what worries me the most for a dynasty. But I'm smashing CeeDee. CeeDee is my guy this year. I think he's going to finish the wide receiver 1. And for redraft purposes, that's a hell of a grab. Probably in the 4th round.
Right. That's a great point, Kevin. I didn't even think about it, but last year when I was doing a dynasty setup, I didn't know where Dak was going to be the following season. So I went with Deshaun Watson, sad face. But had I known that Dak was going to be there for the next 4 to 5 years, I would have smashed Dak all day. So knowing that Lamb's going to have Dak, that's huge. So that is a great point that you bring up.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in Dynasty, some guys always talk about talent trumps it. Like, look at what Allen Robinson did. Look at what these guys do. And that's the case. But look what happened last year with the Cowboys with Andy Dalton throwing people the ball. Like, it just didn't work. It limits their ceiling. So I always look to try to pair my wide receivers up. Do they have a good quarterback? Do they have an excellent quarterback? Not like Baker, these guys. Like, can we get a top 5 quarterback with these guys? And some withstanding, Lamar, those type of guys, yes, they have their issues. But a guy like Dak, Mahomes, all those guys, it just elevates their receivers up. So when I'm doing that, I'm going to look to pair with him. That's why I like CeeDee a little bit more than Jefferson this year. And we're going there. So I think that's all with CeeDee. Since we have a comment, we might as well get right into it. And this is Jacob's guy. So our next kind of guy, breakout guy, is Jerry Jeudy. So what do we think of Jerry Jeudy, Jacob? This is all you, though. This isn't one of mine. I'm going to let Jacob take this one.
All right, so Jerry Jeudy, he was considered by many draft guys to be the best wide receiver heading into the 2020 NFL draft. Now, I don't know what your thoughts were on that, Kevin, last year. Did you have Jeudy or Lamb ranked higher before the draft?
Lamb was my wide receiver 1 going into there, but Jeudy was my number 2. Okay. And then Jefferson was 3. Okay,
nice. So Judy's route running ability, was all the rage, and he did not disappoint. Like in practice, in game, his route running skills were up to par, if not already one of the best in the NFL. Jeudy actually had more targets than CeeDee Lamb last year, only by 2 targets. But, with those 7.1 targets that Jeudy averaged last year, he only caught 3.3 receptions for 53.5 yards and only totaled 3 touchdowns. Jeudy, he winded up finishing as a wide receiver 43 on the season. A few reasons why I am optimistic about a sophomore breakout is just simply time. Last offseason, Drew Lock, he was given the keys to this offense at a very early age with only a few games under his belt. I don't think he was ready, but I think that the Denver Broncos said, you know what, we have this incredible offense. We have we have a veteran in Melvin Gordon. We have Cortland Sutton. There is no reason why this high upside guy in Drew Lock can fail. Lo and behold, he had a COVID-ravaged offseason. He did not look ready. He was a deer in headlights. He was throwing off his back foot every other throw. It was extremely maddening. But it wasn't all Drew Lock's fault, because Jerry Jeudy did have a lot of drops. And that was actually a concern coming out of college. He has incredible route running ability, incredible feet, but he had these drops and it was maddening. So I just think, a full, okay. And not to mention Cortland Sutton is coming back, which it's going to take attention off of Jerry Jeudy, and Jerry Jeudy is going to be matched up with most teams' cornerback 2s, which is even better, and he's going to create even more distance when he runs his routes, making it easier for Drew Lock or even Teddy Bridgewater if the Broncos win the job. I think that Jerry Jeudy is primed to have a breakout year, and he's going as wide receiver 36. So, I mean, he is going as a bottom barrel wide receiver 3, where I think that he can end up as a mid to low wide receiver 2 as far as consistency goes. And he is going to pop off for those wide receiver 1 weeks. As long as Sutton's healthy and Fant's healthy, Jeudy is not going to garner a lot of attention on the defensive side. So I think he's a pretty safe pick as the wide receiver 36, and I would love to have him as either on my bench or just, as my wide receiver 3.
No, I like that. I do want to temper. I mean, he had 10 drops last year, so he does need to improve there. He definitely had that. Now, how much that can be contributed to poor quarterback play? Probably a lot. We're going to talk about Darnell Mooney here in a minute. It's kind of the same thing. Untapped air yards that he didn't get. So I understand that about Jeudy. I agree. I love Judy's talent, and we both think that Locke's probably going to win that job. I think they really like Locke. Bridgewater is the safer choice, but I think Locke gives them the best chance to win. So I think they're going to go with Locke. I could see both of them splitting some time. There's a lot of targets to be had, though. I mean, there's a lot of targets they're going to deal with it. He's going to have to compete with Sutton, who's coming back, who I really like. Fant's going to be there. You got Tim Pat. You guys, some of those guys there he's going to compete with. I currently have him. I was looking at my stuff while you were going just so I can give you a heads up. So I have him getting about 112 targets. 112, 120 targets in that range, and just under 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. Would you be okay with that, or you feel like he's going to do better?
I think in a 17-game season, he's going to do a little bit better. I think he's going to get just above 1,000 yards, around 1,000 and 50-something. I think that he's going to be more. He's going to be heavily involved. He's going to, he's going to get more chemistry with his quarterback this year. I think those are fair numbers. I just think he leaps into that top 24 to 30, instead of the wide receiver 43, he's going to get a consistent Drew Lock, hopefully, they're going to get that chemistry, but him getting the team's second best cornerback, that's only going to bode well for Jeudy.
Yeah, and I think he's a pretty good steal right now in dynasty startups. So when you're looking at his ADP, he's going as wide receiver 31. So for example, he's going after guys like Juju. So Juju's getting taken before him. Devonta Smith's getting taken before him. Kenny Golladay, Cortland Sutton's taken 5 wide receivers before him. Adam Thielen, guys like that are going before Jeudy. But I don't mind grabbing Jeudy as my wide receiver 4 if I can maybe get him on my dynasty roster because of, like you said, that ceiling. But I can't talk about how important quarterbacks are with CD and then be like, oh yeah, well you got to smash Jeudy too, because we do have some quarterback issues there. And I think it's fair to say Judy's got to have that.
I get it. Now, the dream in Denver and the hope is that Denver's going to trade for a quarterback at least next year, a competent quarterback. They're going to make a splash if Drew Lock just does not pan out. So I know that's all conjecture, and it's coming from a Denver guy. But I mean, if you're thinking dynasty, Kevin, would you be comfortable with trading a late first-round pick for Jeudy, or is that just too high of a price?
I think that's a little too high for me right now. But like you said, you got to get out of the head of it. So if you trust Jeudy and you think he's going to get a breakout, late first in next year's class, I'm not that worried about. I wouldn't give up a 2023, but I would give up a 2022, maybe late, possibly. But it just depends. Like you said, it's that quarterback play. Hey, okay, are they going to trade? They could have had Justin Fields, Jacob. We've talked about this. They could have drafted our guy Fields, and we wouldn't have to worry about this, right?
I'm still angry over here that they pass up on Fields. I mean, I got off the plane and I saw that they drafted a cornerback. I was like, okay, great. But then Fields was still on the board. I chucked my phone in front. I was like, no, I'm done. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Fields is the real deal, Kevin.
And we could have had him. We wouldn't have to worry about any of our Fant and Cortland Sutton and Jeudy shares. But now we're still sweating them out. But to talk about Justin Fields, it's a good segue. We're going to be talking about my guy, Darnell Mooney. Right now, his ADP redraft is 130, wide receiver 55, and his ADP for Dynasty is wide receiver 55 as well. So it's actually pretty close to the same. And we'll talk about this. Now, here's the reason why I like Mooney. Now, my good friend Christian Williams, who I do the Debbie Royale podcast with, he tweeted out something today. They made a fantasy Twitter pretty upset. He said that he'd rather have Mooney than T. Higgins this season. And I thought that was spicy take from my guy. But the thing about Mooney that I'll just be very quick on is that you got to understand how bad his quarterback play last year. He garnered 29 most potential air yards in the NFL. So he garnered the most potential air yards, but he ranked 10th in the NFL in unrealized air yards. So over 739 of his yards were unrealized, meaning that those deep throws didn't connect. So on the season, Mooney only had 2 drops on nearly 100 targets. So he's sure-handed. He catches the ball. And he wasn't. So it shows that he wasn't really responsible for those missed air yards. It wasn't the drops that it was. It was the inaccurate quarterback play that he had. And actually, 73 of his 98 targets were catchable. That's it. So you're looking at that. So basically, he had to deal with 25 uncatchable balls the whole season. So essentially, 20 of those targets were contested. So really, like when you're looking at what he had to deal with, he was one of the best wide receivers to get open, create separation, have potential air yards, but his quarterbacks couldn't give him the ball. If he would have realized his true catch rate, which was 83%, that means if you take out all the bad throws and you just look at what he could have caught, he would have had 70 catches, 800 yards, and 5 or 6 touchdowns, which puts him at wide receiver 30. So had he had just a competent quarterback play, he could have been wide receiver 30 last year, and we're talking about him in a whole different mindset.
Right. So are you at all worried about Anthony Miller there?
No, not at all. I'm not scared of Anthony Miller. I think Anthony Miller's had his turn and had his shot, but I don't see a scenario where Mooney's not the wide receiver 2 in that offense. Now, what that offense looks like, depending on – so I think I'd be more hesitant drafting Mooney in redraft than I probably would be drafting him in Dynasty, because I don't know – I think the Bears are just stupid enough to start Andy Dalton. They're just dumb enough to start him more games. That's going to limit, as we saw with the Cowboys last year, their ceiling here, where Fields is going to definitely help Mooney's kind of ceiling. And I think that helps. And I don't know if you saw the quote from Mooney recently. He said, man, my first ball thrown to me by Fields, I just lit up and smiled because it was actually on target. Like he has that connection with Fields. So I love that. I just know the Bears are stupid. And I know the Bears make dumb mistakes, and it's going to be Dalton, and it's going to limit him. So in redraft, especially in your kind of thing, that'd be someone you're picking up off the waiver wire. I would be watching him for that Dalton news to go. But in Dynasty, I mean, listen to some of the receivers going before him. Corey Davis. Are you on the Corey Davis train before Darnell Mooney?
No, I am not. I don't like Corey Davis being the guy. I like him as like a wide receiver too. Yeah. Marquise Brown. No.
Yeah. Mike Williams, who I do like, but he can't stay healthy.
Right.
Like, I understand that with Herbert. I get that upside there. Other guys, Henry Ruggs, who you have mentioned. I don't necessarily mind Henry Ruggs, but I think we kind of know what Henry Ruggs is. I know we got the draft capital. But the other two, like Devontae Parker. Are you kidding me right now? You're drafting Devontae Parker over Darnell Mooney in Dynasty? Like, I don't see the upside with that kind of selection, especially around that same ADP.
That to me just screams floor. Like Mooney has a ton of potential. He has a very high ceiling, but all those other guys being taken before him have proven it, with a little bit of more competent quarterback play. But like you said, as long as Fields starts sometime, Mooney is going to ball out, just because a better quarterback play translates to better wide receivers. It's science, right? So, we are just hoping and praying that Fields starts by like week 3.
Yeah, damn right. It's science. That's all you get in the show is science. Science takes from us teachers over here that aren't science teachers. But boom. I mean, but it is. I mean, when you're looking at it, and it's just like at that point, if you're in a dynasty league and you can grab Mooney for that, I would do it. As far as like what his value is on the trade market, I think it varies. You could find someone like me that really likes Mooney, or people trying to capitalize on him. I got him for a 2nd-round pick, basically a 16-team league, which I finished 2nd in. So a late 2nd round in a 16-team league, which is like an early 3rd from Mooney. And that was like camp, mini camp buzz and all that kind of stuff. Right now, you're probably looking at like an early 2nd.
Okay.
I'm okay with that depending on the roster and how you look. Like if you think Mooney can be it. But remember, if let's say Robinson goes down, or let's say Robinson with his contract, other issues that are going on, Mooney could realistically slip in if he takes that next step, that sophomore breakout like we think. He could be wide receiver 1, right?
Right. Absolutely. To me, he doesn't profile as that just because he's 5'10", but Tyreek Hill is a wide receiver 1, and he's 5'1". So, I'm not going to I'm not going to be like a heightist here, but even if Mooney stays as a wide receiver 2, he should eat. Now, again, I will say in redraft, like you said, I'm keeping Mooney in my back pocket. Like on the watch list, because even Allen Robinson's going to struggle with Andy Dalton at the helm. But once Fields comes in, I feel like Fields is going to look downhill, and Mooney is an athletic freak. So I think that he's going to find Mooney early and often when he gets the call.
Yeah, and I look at Mooney as being kind of like Garrett Wilson, Ohio State wide receiver they have there now. Okay. Pretty good comp. They have pretty much similar athletic profile. Garrett Wilson is obviously a better prospect, but just kind of maybe that connection that he could have, the ability to kind of get downfield with Fields. I really like those two, that comp for them, and they can play well together. So those are our 4 guys. We got Cam Akers, we got CeeDee, we got Darnell, and Jeudy. Anything else on these guys before we move on, Jacob?
I love it, man. I love the list, and I think that all those guys, if I got them on one team, even in redraft, if Jeudy's on my bench and Mooney is in my back pocket on the watch list and stuff, I'd be feeling real good.
Yeah, no, I would too, and I believe in those guys. Like, these are the 4 guys. Even Jeudy, like, I understand the talents there.
Right.
The hesitation I have is quarterback play, but these 4 guys, I do think have potential to break out for the reasons why we talked about. And this is where your upside is, how you win leagues. Now we're going to switch to our next segment, which we're still trying to find a name for. So any listeners out there, if you can help us out with some Mario themed kind of leagues, what we like to do is talk about redraft and dynasty together, and we wrap up there either with questions from you guys or ideas that we have from a dynasty outlook and a redraft outlook. So anybody out there, if you guys got some name ideas here, we are running out of creativity to our degree here.
Yeah, so if you guys can one up my suggestion, which was going off of a Mario Kart, like a triple red shell or blue shell, please chime in and please give a better name, because I know that was very weak.
Yeah, we're all right, but I couldn't think of one, so I can't really complain here. But let's move on to the next segment, which is to be named later. And what we are going to talk about is our dynasty segments right now. And so first thing we're going to do is, and I'll go ahead and let Jacob kind of ask me and some guys that I like here.
Yeah, so as a deep dynasty manager, I am in a 14-team league, and there are no free agents, or just like, we just had like our rookie draft. Who should I be keeping my eye on during the offseason, training camp, and in preseason? Like, or who can I possibly stash right now to be ahead of the curve and see if this guy actually pans out?
Yeah, so I have when I was looking at this, and for my dynasty kind of sleepers, and I don't know, it depends on the leagues you're in. If you're in degenerate leagues like us, a lot of these guys aren't sleepers, but I know a lot of people aren't like that. So here are some guys that you can kind of get towards the end. I think a 4th round, 3rd round, depending on where they're going right now. Larry Roundtree, from a running back from Los Angeles Chargers. I've been pretty high on Roundtree for a while. I think if you have Eckler, you should have tried to grab Roundtree, because he's probably going to be Eckler's backup there in Los Angeles. Maybe not right away, but I think he's going to vault there. If you don't know who Roundtree is, he was a 4-year starter in the SEC of Missouri. So he has that SEC pedigree. He's 5'10", 216, big frame. He's not overly great at anything, but he's a very solid runner. Like, when we're talking about it, he's not overly fast, but he shows good burst. He showed up at the Senior Bowl, had a very good Senior Bowl. He's not the strongest, but he's elusive between the tackles. The big unknown for me is he's not really a pass-catching back. He never really had to do that in Missouri. Are the Chargers going to want that? I don't know, because of the new regime that's going to be there. Eckler's going to be there. They kind of have him for that. So I can see Roundtree maybe finding a role for himself in that offense. And basically his price is either 405 to 412 or undrafted right now. And so I'm going to grab Roundtree. I think Roundtree is a good option for you late.
Okay. That's solid. I'm just thinking, like, the Chargers they have Eckler, and then they have Joshua Kelly, and then they have Justin Jackson. So it's like, can Roundtree, does he have the ability to leapfrog at least like Justin Jackson?
I think he's going to leapfrog Joshua Kelly. I don't like Joshua Kelly that much. I think he was very overrated. He had one game and he was like, oh, Joshua Kelly, he's a thing. He's not a thing to me. I think Justin Jackson will be there. So I do think that he's that second guy there. But I think he can leapfrog Kelly, be that third running back in that room. Eckler has been hurt. Can he contain that full load? Justin Jackson, he didn't look amazing last year. So as far as dynasty-wise, it kind of depends how deep your benches are. But he's a guy that you take a shot on late. Hopefully you get a couple touchdowns, maybe in the red zone type of action from him.
Solid. So give us some more guys, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll go through these a little quicker. Nico Collins, wide receiver from Michigan, my Michigan Wolverines, who I love. And I think that he's a very solid talent. He's going to the desert island, which is the Houston Texans right now, and we don't necessarily know where that's going to be. The targets are going to be there for Nico. I do think he's going to step in. He's got a big frame that he can definitely, if Deshaun is healthy, that's a guy that I would try to maybe grab. So Nico's a guy, especially like, even I think he has some sneaky redraft kind of like late ad stuff going on there, because depending on what their receiver room looks like, and Brandon Cooks, he stayed healthy relatively last year with his concussions. So they got to throw the ball to somebody. I know they said they're going to be a running back team, but whatever. The Texans are a dumpster fire. But in Dynasty, I think he does have a good athletic profile, some okay draft capital. Another guy, Jacob Harris, tight end from LA Rams, is getting a lot of play lately in the news. McVay talked him up. I could see him taking over as the second tight end in that offense. So Jacob Harris is an interesting stash. Like, that's a big taxi squad stash if you have him. I will say his price is going up. So in a depleted league right now, he just went 102. So, and this is like
and a beast.
Yeah, and his measurables are great. Like, when you look at his player profiler, he played well at UCF, and he's versatile. He's 6'5", 219, so he's kind of that tweener. So they're going to move him around a little bit, and especially in McVay's offense, I can see it. I don't necessarily think he's a tight end. I think he's a versatile H-back, kind of move him around, can play different positions, and maybe get in the slot a little bit. So I like his versatility and getting compared to McVay. He's not bad, but like I said, in a depleted draft, he just went 102. So his price is starting to get a little high.
Right.
And then I got to shout out my guy from Kent State. And this is a guy who was really high on pre-workout, pre-combine. Isaiah McCoy. He's on the Steelers team. He's not going to see any run this year. So I want everybody to know out there that in that crowded wide receiver room, I have a hard time seeing him breaking the practice squad. But he's a very good wide receiver who has I think the one thing I love about Isaiah McCoy from Kent State the most is that his drive, he works his butt off. He always had that that mentality, that underdog mentality. So if anybody can make it off the practice squad, I feel like it's McCoy. Let's say Juju leaves. Let's say James Washington maybe they move on from there. Then you kind of have McCoy slip in there if you can make that team next year. But Isaiah McCoy is definitely someone I'm keeping on the radar.
Yeah, so he's kind of like a project, whereas like you said, like James Washington, I mean, I feel like Pittsburgh should just move on. So once they finally do, it's going to be, like you said, Juju and Chase and Deontay, and then why not take a stab on McCoy.
Isaiah McCoy, yeah. This is a project, like a project. But I liked him. I liked his profile coming out.
Nice. Why not?
So,
right?
Especially if you're a dynasty and you got deeper benches. If you don't, obviously, but he's someone just to keep an eye on. I don't think he's going to be there an option this year. But those are my guys. Larry Roundtree, Nico Collins, Jacob Harris, and Isaiah McCoy would be the four guys I would look at. What about you in redraft? Who are some guys going outside the top, whatever that you have on 4 for 4 that you're looking at as like potential sleepers?
Yeah, so I was looking at guys going outside the top at 125.
Okay.
So I touched up on Henry Ruggs last week, as he's going to be a more consistent low-end wide receiver 3 option instead of just being a best ball dart throw. I think that John Gruden's going to manufacture touches for him. But I wanted to start it off with Russell Gage. And I know that he was the popular name right after Julio Jones's trade to Tennessee. But Gage is still currently being drafted in the middle of the 12th round as wide receiver 57. And Julio Jones's departure leaves behind roughly 7.6 targets per game heading into the 2021 season. And over the last 7 weeks of the 2020 season, Gage averaged 8.1 targets. And on those 8.1 targets, he averaged 5.3 catches and 58.1 yards while totaling 3 touchdowns. So I'm thinking with the full offseason, knowing that he is the next man up and that he is the wide receiver 2 right behind Ridley, some argue that he could be the wide receiver 3 and Kyle Pitts is the wide receiver 2 now, but Gage knows that offense. He's been there for a few years. So there is something to be said about that chemistry with Matt Ryan right off the bat. So I believe that Gage has the ceiling to be a consistent wide receiver 3 and could realistically have some wide receiver 2 weeks next year. So Russell Gage, keep your eyes, in the 12th round, why not take a stab on that upside?
Yeah, I like Russell Gage, and like you said, I think he'll have some games. Now you got to pick the right games. Like you're gonna have to do that well. But he does. He's a very solid floor kind of wide receiver at that point. I've always been a big guy on Gage, and I'm happy for him because I think he's gonna have a little bit of a mini breakout.
Yeah. I mean, plug him as your wide receiver 3, and I think you'll be pleased with the consistent, he'll have up games, he'll have mediocre games, but I don't think he'll ever have duds. All right, so let's move on to a veteran tight end by the name of Jared Cook. Cook is currently being drafted at the start of the 13th round as tight end 18. Cook, with Hunter Henry's departure, Cook is sliding right into that tight end 1 role. Henry had 93 targets in 14 games last season, which equates to 6.6 targets per game. Cook was a solid option for the Saints last season and should be a solid security blanket for sophomore quarterback Justin Herbert. Now, I don't necessarily think that Cook will be on the field a ton at age 34, so volume could be an issue, but he's going to be a weekly tight end threat thanks to his height and size. Now, a side note, Cook has played his best ball and produced his best receiving totals ever since turning 30. So he has gotten better with age. He has gotten more run at his later age, it has taken Jared Cook a while to bloom. So even though he's 34, he should be solid, and he is being taken as a tight end 18 in the 13th round, basically being undrafted. So those brave fantasy managers who stream the tight end position should take a chance and draft a 13-year veteran and hope that Herbert clings on to him in the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cook burned a lot of managers last year, beginning of the year, but he still had, towards the end of the year, he had 11, 12, 11, 14. So if you're streaming, that's kind of what you're looking for, right? Those numbers, and then hopefully a touchdown.
Exactly, and he is a touchdown threat every week.
He scored 7 touchdowns last year. So we lost Jacob here. He'll probably pop back in. There he is.
Lost you there, Kevin. I apologize.
All right. It's all the Jared Cook veteran deals there we got going on.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So we won't harp on Jared Cook anymore. Jared Cook is a solid value and a streamer. Now let's move on. So my last sleeper pick is Phillip Lindsay. Lindsay is currently being taken at the end of the 13th round as RB53. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, I'm not taking anyone in that Houston backfield except for David Johnson. They already got Mark Ingram and Rex Burkhead. Well, I mean, Lindsay had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons to start his career off with, and he played behind an atrocious Broncos offensive line. And he found every single running lane and had so many home run plays. He knows how to find those seams. And I know it's going to be a similar story with Houston, whereas they don't have a great offensive line. They're not going to have a threat of passing at all, if it's a Tyrod Taylor. So I know that the cards are stacked up against Lindsey, but they've been stacked up against him his whole career. Now he is 26 years old, which is 3 years younger than the next youngest running back in David Johnson. So he has like that. He can provide a spark to that Houston Texans offense that those three aging veteran running backs just cannot provide. And I actually have a conspiracy theory that the Houston Texans really just want to trade all of these running backs during the season so that they can just stockpile draft picks, since they pretty much screwed themselves over with, just like giving away their first round picks and stuff. So I think that Philip Lindsay as the RB53 is insane value, and I would be stashing him on my bench on all of my fantasy leagues, because he's pretty much not going to be drafted by pretty much anyone.
Yeah. No, I like Lindsey. Someone's going to break out that backfield, right? And I'm not a David Johnson guy, so I don't mind going the Lindsey route and just hoping, especially redraft, because it's like whatever. I mean, I have him on some dynasty teams. I can't get rid of him. I'm hoping that he has a couple good games, and if I need to ship him from a team, I can. But I'm a guy that gave up a second round pick for Lindsey going for it last year, and obviously that didn't work out. But I have faith in him. I think that he could do it.
I will say that Philip Lindsay dealt with a toe injury the whole year, but he gutted it out because he plays no matter what. If he can physically do it, he will be out on the field. But it was to his detriment that he did that, because he struggled all of last year. And if he is truly over that toe injury, then he should be able to ball out, even if the Houston Texans offense itself is garbage, which it will be.
Yeah, which it will be. So, but we're hoping that someone can get the targets and the rushing yards there and go from there. All right, any other sleepers you got?
No, those are all my sleepers. I mean, like, I was going to touch up on a Rashad Perriman of Detroit just because there's no targets to go around, but I don't really want to waste our listeners' time. I mean, like, he's going as a wide receiver 68. So, I mean, if you want to take a stab or just put him on your watch list, I would bet that either him or your boy Tyrell Williams, like you're saying, he's a deep threat too. So, watch out for this Detroit Lions offense, because they're probably going to have to catch up every single game, and someone's going to have to get those targets other than Hawk, right?
Yeah, but the only problem is Jared Goff's throwing the ball. And if Jared Goff's throwing the ball, I don't know if that ball is going to get anywhere close to the intended target. So it might just go Hawk on default.
Which is fair, but, you have to trust one of those wideouts, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to move. We're moving on from there. But, hey, we appreciate you tuning in tonight. We definitely went over, we went over Cam, CeeDee, Darnell Mooney, Jerry Jeudy, some sleepers on both sides. We touched on the Cam Newton news. Anything else for tonight?
Oh, man, that's it, Kevin. I just want to say how much of a blast this is and how much I appreciate all you listeners out there. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. We'll catch you next week, same time. If you want to watch it live, we're live every Tuesday at 7:30 Eastern. And you can catch us on Twitter at Triple Play Fantasy. If not, always hit that subscribe button on podcast, and we'll check you guys out next week.